Welcome to Aspen Leading Edge podcast. This is Patty Roberts from St. Mary's University School of Law. Today I have two guests with me, Andrew Verstein from UCLA Law and Lynn LoPucki, who is speaking to us from the University of Florida Levin College of Law. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thanks.
Very good to have you here to talk about something I'm not too familiar with because I have not taught in this field, but business associations, a popular course. Some law schools require it. Very important as students come out of their legal education. And I know that you all have co-authored a book, Business Associations, A Systems Approach. The second edition is out now or just coming out. And so I'd like to start by asking, what is a systems approach?
Well, it's a way of presenting the subject. It describes the physical system, not the conceptual system. It's about business people, lawyers, documents, corporate records, court files, stock exchanges. And we teach law in that context. It's a problem-based approach inherently. The problems are fact-rich. The people have names, roles, goals, personalities, and the student's role is as a lawyer for a person, human or artificial, in a specific time and place with the information that they'd have if they were a lawyer in that time and place. They formulate strategies for clients to reach their goals, and the question is not, as in most casebook, who wins? The question is, what should the student do in that situation? We're trying to give students the experience of practice.
And what does that look like in the classroom?
Well, in my classroom, I role play. I play all the roles of the client and anybody else the students want to talk to. And I make the students stay in that role. That is, they can't say, well, I'd ask the client such and such. I just tell them, I'm the client. I'm here. Ask me. Get them into the role so that they can take responsibility for what they're talking about.
More generally, I think it means that we spend a lot of time treating problems with care in class. I probably spend half of my time lecturing about the law, like any lecturer might, but then I turn the conversation over to the students for half the class as we engage with problems that have enough meat on the bones for us to work on them together at some length. And then the problems basically do have right answers in most cases, so it still feels like we're working towards something together. It's not an open-ended gab fest, but we're working on these problems the way a lawyer in the environment might work on these problems.
Well, I imagine that students really appreciate that problem-based approach and that they remember more that way. But many case books also include academic theories in their book. And is that something that one finds in your book, or have you steered away from much of the academic theory inclusion? How is that balanced with the problem-based approach?
The way that we went through this is to focus on the law and the legal practice and not to put the legal scholarship as the centerpiece of this book. Our theory was that adopters are going to find a neutral platform that is solid and comprehensive upon which they can apply whatever scholarly brush they want to. And we have found that people who are prominent in different academic disciplines are able to make it work for them. We've got people who do law and economics, law and political economy, other critical perspectives. They're working with the facts and the law that we put out there and engaging with it, teaching against what they want to teach against, teaching for whatever they want to teach. Personally, I teach the book basically as it's written, and I find ample grounds for big ideas just teeming in everyday problems and in any given case. But there are people who choose to supplement this with other scholarly materials. I know an adopter who assigns like an article a week, a law review article alongside the text, and just picks out whatever topic is going to be like best illuminated. And the theory here is that our book, because it isn't, say, squibbing academic articles all the time, you're not teaching against the book. You're adding to it whatever you want to add to it, and the book is not getting in the way. It's supporting it, and it's modular, and it's ready for you.
And you just completed the second edition, which I know took a considerable amount of time and effort. What kinds of things have changed with the second edition that you find received the most emphasis or were perhaps most current and added to this new edition?
I'd say the thing that changed the most was timing the book. Our book is set up by assignments. They're supposed to take a particular length of time. And both Andrew and I found that that didn't work in a number of the assignments. So we needed to cut those assignments back so that the book would teach the way that it intended. In terms of substance, we worked on the problems, tried to get all of the problems to work and get rid of the problems that didn't work. And I would say regarding the substance that it really didn't change very much from the first to the second edition.
We did update a few cases because the world and the law changed in the meantime. We changed out a partnership case that had to do with a fishing boat company and replaced it with a crypto case. So there's some things here that make the case book read like a 2024 case book. But most of our work was making sure that our ambitions for the first edition were fully vindicated in the second edition, so that a person could open up an assignment and say, I know how long these 18 pages will take to teach. I can tell because they all take the same amount of time to teach.
And what prompted the two of you to join up initially with the first edition of Business Associations, A Systems Approach? What did you find lacking, and how might professors come to choose your book because of its distinctiveness from the field?
Yeah, I think those two questions are related. The book has a number of commitments that it tries to follow through on, things that are pretty distinctive. And those are the things that brought Professor LoPucki and I together to work on a book that would do all four of these things. So one thing is that the book foregrounds, or at least doesn't put in the background, alternative entities and non-corporate entities. A lot of books were written at a time that the corporate form was the main form by any measure, but the world has changed and LLCs are as important or more important than corporations on some measures. And our book is organized in a way that doesn't just tuck LLCs into the back pocket or the last chapter or the last day of class. Instead, we teach business law functionally. So we hit each topic. We hit governance. We hit limited liability. And each time we hit a topic, we talk about how corporations deal with this and how LLCs deal with this and how the other entities deal with this. So we're making the other entities sit at the table alongside the corporation in a way that reflects what lawyers actually experience when they're forming and advising businesses. A second thing that this book set out to do and that we were pretty committed to was a contemporary style. There are books out there that give you a long case with a very little commentary. Maybe the case is quite old. Maybe the law is itself no longer the law. And the purpose for students is to kind of deal with the archaeology of this case. That's a very common 1L approach, but a lot of BA books do that too. And we just didn't want to do that. That's for some people, that wasn't for us. So we wrote a book that's clear, direct, jargon-free, aggressively edited, easy to read. All of our cases are modern with contemporary facts so that people are learning about how actual businesses in 2024 are encountering problems and what the legal resolutions are. We also tried to keep the overall page limit manageable so that people could actually get through most of the book if they wanted to. So it's 651 pages is slender by the standard of a full service case book. We have already talked about problems. Problems are very important to this book. And we wrote a book that gives you ample problems to fill up a lot of class time if that's what you care about. We do. And then the final thing is both Lynn and I have had experience with other people's books and finding them challenging to adopt into. And that's because people write problems, but they don't give you the answers or don't give you clear answers, or the TM is incomplete, the teacher's manual, I mean. We tried to write a book that would make things really easy for adopters, the kind of support we would have wanted as we were joining a new book. So we wrote a 300-page teacher's manual. We have full slides for every assignment, thousands of slides. We have practice exams that are keyed to different lengths of the point in the semester where you might use them for students to be able to look at. We've got a hard copy statutory supplement that students can get on Amazon or download. The goal here was to create a turnkey solution for people so that as they join, this wouldn't be hard on them. It would be easy for a new adopter to do something new and different.
That sounds really comprehensive. You make me almost believe I could teach BA from this book.
You could with our book.
It sounds really terrific, especially a teacher's manual that is half the size of the casebook is really something. What is the receptivity to the second edition? Have you talked to people who are considering adopting it or who have adopted it yet?
Well, I'm sure you know it's hard to keep track of actually who's doing what out there. There's no central database of who's adopting what, but we do get in touch with people who want to ask us a question about the book or tell us how it's gone. And we've been excited about this second edition. I know we've got a number of new adopters, one at Yale, one at Northwestern. We've got a bunch of other schools that sit at different places in different states. I've been impressed by the interest that people have taken so far. It's a young book, but we've gotten a lot of correspondence of people indicating that their students have liked it and that they intend to use it again.
Well, and I think that the problem-based approach is one that is going to be turned to increasingly in legal education because of the next gen bar exam and what that is expected to look like. Less rote memorization and more engaging with problem problems much like you have described.
That's right. If I can agree with that. I mean, the future of bar exams seems to be some combination of multiple choice questions and also more extensive case file questions. And the systems approach is really built to address both of those things. We've got an enormous number of multiple choice questions that we've prepared for our adopters. And actually, I've worked with adopters to write multiple choice questions for their own final exams. You can't publish those en masse for all your adopters all at once for confidentiality reasons, but several people, we worked out arrangements with me where I helped them to draft multiple choice questions to help make sure their students had things to work with. And then, of course, problems that are fact-rich are very much part of that as well.
Sounds like an excellent addition to the marketplace for business associations case books, and one that's really distinctive from what you've described. So congratulations on the second edition. I'm going to turn now to a couple of other things during our conversation. First, Andrew, I noticed that you are the faculty co-director of the Lowell Milken Institute for Business Law and Policy at UCLA Law School. Tell us a little bit about what the Institute does and what your students engage in who are part of the Institute.
The Institute is 11 years old now, and it was conceived at that time by Lowell Milken, our visionary and supportive benefactor, as a way to get business law into the school in every way that could matter. The most important thing is the student experience. So we are putting on dozens of programs each year where students can engage with the practice of business law and business regulation. We bring in antitrust regulators, we bring in securities litigators, we bring in people who have careers in business law that maybe aren't as familiar to students who went to law school because they saw Ally McBeal and wanted to be a litigator of some kind. And we're trying to make this stuff less alien and familiar and unfamiliar. So lunchtime programs and conferences that are student focused. We also run the equivalent of moot court programs, but for transactional lawyering, we've got a number of programs that are in different business areas so that people can try bankruptcy law or they can try transactional drafting and M&A in a competitive context and feel some esprit de corps in that. We also maintain a specialization program so students can focus their studies and indicate to employers that they focus their studies on topics relevant to business. The Institute is primarily a student-focused program, but it has two other legs. It also supports faculty like myself. We put on conferences where faculty could try out their ideas and get their interlocutors to come in and spar with them on the record. And we also put on programs that are meant to engage the legal community, principally alums, but other folks as well. LA has a new Silicon Beach kind of startup scene with a lot of tech companies coming down too. And we're trying to make sure that UCLA is a place that can convene those conversations. And as faculty co-director, I work with the staff of LMI to make sure that we reach all those constituencies.
Well, that's exciting. Now, Lynn, I'd like to talk to you about the work that you have been doing regarding corporate greenhouse gas emissions. Tell us a little bit about what's been going on with you.
Well, that greenhouse gas is part of a larger project I'm doing. I call it the Stakeholder Takeover Project. So far, there are 4 published articles as part of the project. The basic idea is that by improving the information system for stakeholders, for customers, for employees, for suppliers, anybody who's interacting with the corporation and dependent on the corporation, we can improve that information system that those stakeholders, well, they can take over the corporation with respect to those aspects that they're in agreement on. And greenhouse gas emissions, I think, is one of those aspects that there's a very widespread agreement now that greenhouse gas emissions are a problem for the planet and somebody needs to do something and nobody else is doing something. So the idea here in a microcosm is I have an app. It's programmed, it's in beta testing, might go final within the next week or two. And the app, you take it to the grocery store, it's on your phone, and you enter the brand name. You just enter a few letters of it, and you'll see the brand name. And then you can see the owner of the brand, the emissions of the owner of the brand, because these reports, the information's not filed in the same name you see in the grocery store. But the app puts the two together, and you can buy your groceries with greenhouse gas emissions in mind. You're not going to give up your favorite food, but you give up something. Well, don't give up something. In one of those situations where you don't even know the quality of the products and the prices are the same, you pick the one that has the lowest greenhouse gas emissions. And if enough people do that, the corporations will have to change what they're doing. And if that works with respect to greenhouse gas, then we can expand out to other issues, to other industries besides grocery stores.
That's fascinating. As far as the greenhouse emissions, the gas emissions, and the data that you are going to be accessing through the app, or the consumer will access through the app, are corporations required to to report their greenhouse gas emissions? Is that something across the board they have to do?
We're in a transition now. Reporting has been voluntary up to this point, but now California has a mandatory reporting law, and we're waiting a year or two for it to go into effect. The SEC has a mandatory reporting rule, which may or may not ever make it into effect. The Europeans have adopted mandatory reporting, and it's going to apply to a substantial portion of the corporations that operate in the United States, to American corporations. So there are a lot of forces that are pushing more and more disclosure. So right now, grocery stores, for example, most of them, grocery store chains don't report. Most of the food processors do report. Meat packers generally do report. So some are reporting, some are not, and we've got to push them in the direction of more reporting, but the governments are pushing them at the same time.
Well, in addition to the greenhouse gas emissions app, which good luck and congratulations, that within a week, that's pretty exciting. What sorts of other stakeholder takeover projects have you examined? Are there a couple more you can just give us a preview of?
Well, there are other issues that can be included in the stakeholder takeover. For example, whether corporations are law-abiding. There's already a pretty good data set that's put out by Violations Tracker that has enough information to do rankings, and I'll probably get in touch with them and see if we can work together to turn that into a ranking system, which right now it isn't. There are very few issues today on which the information is actually available to do the stakeholder takeover. Greenhouse gas is the one issue where it's clear we've got over 90% of the largest corporations are reporting. But if you go to something else like racial composition of the workforce, it was only at about 25% 2 years ago. Today, but we're on the edge of maybe all of those EEO-1 forms being made public. And then suddenly that would be available so that people could express their opinions to the corporations about how they want that handled.
Interesting. Well, that sounds like you're going to be busy with that for a while and continuing with your follow-up to the 4 articles and the new app. Andrew, now that you have the second edition out of Business Associations, A Systems Approach, what are you working on this summer?
I've got a great set of co-authors with whom I'm working on great things right now. So I've got a few friends at the University of Michigan Ross School who've been helping me track forms of hitherto unnoticed insider trading. And we're working on our second and also our third paper that will be documenting huge volumes of insider trading that the SEC appears not to know about. Our first paper in this series, the SEC cited it immediately, changed the law, thanked us for finding it. And the second and third papers, we're talking about events that are even bigger and more worthy of the SEC's attention. Related to Professor LoPucki's discussion about information environment, it's shocking how much isn't known about corporations. It's just shocking. There is no database that you can go to today to figure out how many firms are incorporated in which state. It just simply isn't a database that's available. So I've been working with RAs to build that database, and I hope to have that available soon so you can just check whether Delaware incorporations have moved at the same pace as Montana or whatever. And another project looks at diversity on boards of directors. And this is something that people care a lot about. There's a lot of research what does and doesn't drive that, but we have a theory about one important source of resistance to diversity on boards, and we're trying to prove that some unexpected factors really hold up the effort to have diverse boards.
Well, those also sound like really interesting projects, and I'm looking forward to reading about what you decided. How exciting that what you and your co-authors found immediately ended up in a change in the law with the SEC. That's really great. Now, before we conclude, I wanted to ask you both what your predictions are for the future of legal education in the coming decade. And Lynn, maybe you can start.
Well, U.S. News is in control, so I think we're going wherever U.S. News takes us. This shift that U.S. News did most recently to bar exam created a big splash. Its bar passage rate is the factor, and it's 25% of the rating. So the University of Florida immediately plummets 8 places in the rankings, I guess 7 places in the rankings, because we don't have a good bar passage rate. So now we're intensely focused on getting a good bar passage rate, and we're going to do it because we've got better students that are beating us on the bar passage rate. This is really a situation of information system control. That U.S. News is the information system. They're allocating the students among the schools, and so we're under their power. And I don't think it bodes well for us to be under that power.
Thank you. Andrew?
Well, U.S. News has been in in control for a while, and it's led to things in the recent past that I think are interesting templates for what the future can be like. A lot of law schools do more executive education, certificate programs, and Masters of Legal Studies work than they did a generation ago. And that's largely for access to a group of students who don't show up into the normal bin with the other U.S. News and World Report statistics. And so we've got a whole bunch of law students out there, to say nothing of the LLMs, a whole bunch of law students out there who we're not teaching them to practice law, we're teaching them kind of how to engage with lawyers, okay? That's kind of the skill that's coming across through these various degrees. I think an interesting thing is that increasingly, as we train lawyers, we may be training people whose main job isn't to lawyer, it's to engage with lawyers of a kind, which is the AI lawyers that are going to try to take over everything. We're soon going to have pretty good AI products that are pretty amazing, and yet there'll be ethical and practical difficulties with using them well. And it's going to become that we're going to be spending a lot of time teaching our students how ethically and practically to use these devices. And we're going to take a lot of our exec ed kind of content and bring it over to the JD class to teach them how to engage with experts who aren't them.
That's an excellent point. We certainly will have to do more of that. And your field, business and law, will be a prime example of how that kind of interdisciplinary education can go back and forth fluidly. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us the news of the Business Association's A Systems Approach Second Edition's publication and what makes it distinctive for the marketplace, why professors and students should consider using it. And I should have asked you earlier, let me do so now. What is the student reaction when you teach from the book? What kind of feedback do you all get from students?
For me, it's wonderful. I have taught against the book all of my career, and I dreamed of the day that I would have a book that was organized the way that I felt the book should be organized. And now I've got it, and the student reaction is great.
My students love having expectations about how each class is going to go, how things are going to go in a week, what we're going to be teaching in a week, slides that look consistent from day to day. The coherence is something that's really hard to put a price on that, but I know students really hate it if you jump around in a book.
They do.
Go from one assignment to another. They hate that. So the ability to put things together in an order that isn't path dependent, it's not a result of history that the assignments are in the order they are. It's not a result of history how long the assignments are. We made intentional choices, really thinking about the student experience. And I think students also find it to be stress-free to just engage with the syllabus. They like that.
Well, I hope that there are many more students who adopt the second edition of Business Association's A Systems Approach through Aspen Publishing. And I want to thank you both for being guests, Professor Andrew Verstein from UCLA and Lynn LoPucki from University of Florida.
Thank you very much.
If you've enjoyed today's conversation and want to listen to other thought leaders in the Academy, you can find additional episodes on Aspen Leading Edge's podcast page or on the channels that you find your other favorite podcasts. Thanks for joining.